So the big new October ice patch just hit Trackmania, mainly targeting ice and water. We're going to have a look at what's changed and how to take advantage of it in this video. The main change that's occurred on ice is that any new direction change will occur a massive acceleration penalty. This will completely shut out the engine and reduce your acceleration to 0. Here is some footage of me showing just how strong this acceleration penalty is. Even on max throttle, when wiggling to maximise direction changes, I actually slow the car down. This means, in essence, you do not want to be twitchy on ice. Being smooth on ice is really important now in general, but particularly on flat ice. So what about the intended targets of the patch? What about ice wiggles and bobsleigh? Are there any new bugs we can take advantage of? Well, of course. Let's talk about ice wiggles first. You might remember old ice wiggles, where a micro SD mechanic was abused. These old wiggles are super dead. Instead, there is a new way to go fast on straight ice. We need to combine 4 ideas. Let's talk about idea number 3 first. A tap on ice can completely rotate your car. We can incredibly easily change forward speed into sideways speed. This is essentially how all ice slides work. In an ice slide, the rear wheels have less grip than the front wheels, and this means that the rear wheels will step out and the car will start to slide into that angle. We can turn this into forward acceleration. In essence, a single tap can control our car's acceleration, so point 3 is solved. On point 1 we can alternate between alternate ice slide directions, just like we used to. Now let's talk about point 2 and the new acceleration penalty. The acceleration penalty only applies to new torsion vector changes. This means basically changing from left to right or from right to left. The penalty is quite large. This makes the tap release very important, because it's how we trick the physics engine into believing that we're turning left when we're still actually turning right, or vice versa. As soon as the physics engine believes we're already turning in one direction, the new acceleration penalty can't apply anymore, because it believes that we're already in or about to begin an ice slide. On point 4, because the car accelerates much faster below 200 speed, we're not going to achieve anything by doing wiggles below 200, because the normal acceleration of the car will be faster than the wiggle. There is also a skill ceiling to high speed wiggles, which is capped at how fast you can reliably tap, release and tap again. I would estimate that this top cap of acceleration for most players is going to be around 400 to 500 speed. Because these wiggles are essentially mini ice slides instead of mini ice SDs, you do not want to use any action keys. These ice wiggles are also fairly weak. I wouldn't recommend learning them as a newer player. They're also quite tricky to handle correctly, and because the acceleration penalty is there to hit you if you do it wrong, it's also quite risky. Even some pros might get limited use out of them. This same nerf also applies to bobsleighs, since old bobsleighs abuse the same SD gimmick. It is theoretically possible to achieve the same double tap ice wiggle on bobsleighs now as for flat ice. However, it's going to be much harder to control and much more precise. For most players, you'd be much better off trying to maximise the amount of flat acceleration you get. This essentially means taking the bobsleigh as smooth as possible. However you achieve this doesn't really matter anymore. This means that there's no optimal action key for bobsleighs. The best action key is simply the one that keeps you flat. This also means that tapping in bobsleighs or varying between action keys also can work just as well. In theory, this new ice wiggle can be applied on bobsleigh with extremely rapid tapping. However, I do not believe this is really human viable past speeds of around 300. From 200 to 300 you might get some extra speed boost out of tapping down on bobsleighs, and it is possible that someone will find a way to abuse this tapping strategy as a human. However, this seems more like a task mechanic than a human one. So the new ice acceleration penalty has been a heavy nerf to ice SDs in general, and this applies on both flat ice for ice wiggles and on bobsleigh. This also means that action keys on ice are essentially useless. The only use for action keys now is to try and maintain a relatively flat turn in a bobsleigh. However, you will not get the same speed boost you got pre-patch. I do not think trying to patch these new ice wiggles would be a good idea from the Deo. This is because the new ice wiggle relies on 2 mechanics: ice slide itself, which is an important part of all ice maps, as well as the way that the rear wheels step out during drifting, which are vital parts of the physics engine for both tech drifts as well as speed drifts on full speed. Regardless, that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful or you learned something.